Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I have been off for a week. I was feeling just a little bit burned out in my reading. And so I decided to take a week off and just read just for fun, fluffy books that I wasn't gonna talk about on the channel and just for my own enjoyment. And I had a nice time. I enjoyed it. And then came down with a terrible cold and have lost my voice. So I have books I want to talk about. But we'll see how much I am physically able to do. But first, of course, you need the crafting update. So I finished the blue onesie. Here's the green onesie. And now I'm working on a striped onesie. And once those are all done, I will block them all to kind of make them look a little neater and nicer. I'm making the striped onesie on my teeny tiny needles, so it's hard to see, but you've got the little blue and green stripes. So we'll see how that turns out. That's what I've been working on lately. I am doing a buddy read this week, which is fun. Second ever buddy read with Tiffany at Towering TBR. And we are reading the book Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. And so far, so good. It's just going to be over the course of this week. So next week, I will talk a little bit more about that book. But let's jump into what I have read a little bit this week and a little bit from 2 weeks ago. So the first book I want to talk about was a recommendation from Tiffany at Towering TBR. So make sure to check out her channel. And this is The Invisible Kingdom, Reimagining Chronic Illness by Megan O'Rourke. This book takes a bit of a deep dive into the author's experience as well as the general population's experience with chronic illness and illness that is not well diagnosed, a lot of autoimmune diseases, and the struggle to get taken seriously, to get treatment for chronic pain and the symptoms that won't go away, and how people's lives are affected by this. So I did read this a couple weeks ago, but what this book really did for me was it gave me a lot of empathy for people that choose to try very out there treatments for their symptoms. I think sometimes I can feel a little judgmental of people who try dubious treatments for their symptoms, and I feel like it's their fault. Why would they try this when it could be damaging? It could be unsafe. And I think this book really did help me understand the empathy. That doesn't mean that there aren't people that are trying to take advantage of people with undiagnosable illnesses or difficult symptoms that won't go away. Yes, there are snake oil salesmen for sure, but it helps me to really understand how you get into that mindset where you are going to try what you can because nothing else works. I thought some of this was very relatable. I don't have the same things that this author had, but I have dealt with thyroid issues and getting the right diagnosis and getting doctors to take your symptoms seriously and figure things out. I get that. It's very hard, and it's very hard as a woman. And so I think that this book really touched on a lot of really important topics. There is so much research that needs to be done, and understanding and looking at what kinds of treatments and what recovery looks like for different people. I thought that it was really well done. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. My only slight criticism is that the author is coming from a very privileged place. And I do think she tries to acknowledge that not everyone has the same experience that she has, but she is able to try so many different experimental treatments. And I think she did come from a very privileged place that many people who deal with these kinds of illnesses on a day-to-day basis do not have the kind of privilege that the author had. I do think that maybe this book would have benefited by having more diverse stories maybe included, because her story definitely is not representative of the larger population, but it just brought up so many interesting things about chronic illness that I do highly recommend. I thought it was really well done. Now, this book was a recommendation from the channel The Cat Bite, so I will link that down below. And this is Ants Among Elephants, An Untouchable Family, and the Making of Modern India. This is written by a woman. She grew up in a family that was very privileged in that they were able to get an education and they were able to change their circumstances. But her family also came from the caste system in India, and they were very discriminated against based on these societal structures. And so I thought it was very interesting. She conducted lots of interviews with family members to understand what had happened. And it has been a couple weeks since I have read this, so I don't remember all the details, but I do remember at the time feeling a little bit like the author could have tightened up the narrative a little bit. I think the author could have made the narrative a little more compelling and a little less scattered. I think had the author maybe focused in a little bit more, it could have been a slightly more clear narrative. But overall, I really thought this book was well done. It talks about her family's different activism and work in political parties and their efforts to trying to change India. But I think what I really got out of this book was that there are a lot of difficult things, but the people who had to deal with the brunt of everything often were the women. And so I do like this kind of book. I love books where people are looking at their own family history and trying to get connected with the people that came before them. So Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot recommended the book Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner. And this book is following two sisters, and one has some very severe mental illness. And it mostly follows the younger sister who is very studious, who's trying to do everything right, and is trying to manage these feelings of resentment that she has for her sister for messing things up in the family and trying to have a relationship with her sister when her sister often comes into her family's life to take advantage and isn't getting the proper treatment for her complicated mental health struggles. I think this book did a really great job at illustrating some of the struggles that family members of people with severe mental health problems can have. I do think that, once again, this book did come from a bit of a privileged place. The only reason that the older sister was still alive is that she had such a strong safety net to fall back on and had parents that were willing to continue to help and support her. I couldn't put this book down. I really wanted to know what happened, and I don't know if I felt very satisfied by the end, but I do think it did show that pain and connection that can come from family and from struggling with these really difficult things. I think it did show a lot of pretty privilege. The older sister is described as being very beautiful, and she gets away with so much because people think that she looks nice. If they didn't think she looked nice, they would not have allowed her to continue treating them in the way that she treats them. And I think that there is a little bit of that going on. Overall, I enjoyed this book, but I'm still not quite sure what to think about it. I just don't know if I really found the main character, the younger sister, to be very likable. I was hoping to see maybe more growth or more effort on her part to grow past these difficult things from her childhood. And I don't know if I really got that. But overall, I think it was pretty good, but I still am not quite sure what to think about it. So Melinda at A Web of Stories recommended the book The Distant Marvels by Chantal Acevedo. This book is following the story of a family and the story of the Cuban Revolution. We have our main character who is trapped in a building with some other women during a hurricane and is telling her life story to them, telling them about her mother and father and their story and how they came to Cuba and what happened after. And honestly, I really liked the story. I think that it worked well. It was believable. The main character was a lectora in a cigar factory, and I had actually just read a book that had talked about this, and so I was kind of excited about it. The idea is that she would work in this cigar factory telling stories and reading books to the workers to keep them entertained while they rolled the cigars. And I was kind of bummed that there wasn't really anything about that, because my first thoughts when I picked up the book was, yes, I want to know more about this. I just learned about it. But I think the actual story about Cuba's fight for independence and her family and everything was really good. I just think that maybe my least favorite part of this entire book was the framing device of having her be this retired lectora who was going to tell her family's story to these women while they were trapped during a hurricane. And I just don't know if I loved the framing device. I think the actual story was really good, and I do recommend this book. I think it was good. I just don't know if the framing device was really necessary or added anything, and instead felt like the author was trying to shoehorn in some sort of moral of the importance of storytelling when that wasn't necessarily the heart of the book, at least not what I got out of it. And so I just don't know if the framing device really was giving what it was supposed to be giving, but I fully enjoyed the family adventure kind of tale. I was really invested in the tragedies and the difficulties that they went through. So overall, I did really enjoy this book, but just with a caveat. Okay, I need to stop talking because my voice is just gonna go out. So if you have any thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below. And I will see you next week with another regularly scheduled